Okay, we're finally back. This is chapter 5. It's actually the longest chapter in the whole book, so I'm going to break it up into two parts. So that way it's not an hour and a half video, and it'll be more used to like the 25-minute to 30-minute videos that seem to be doing a lot better, view count-wise, than the hour ones. So this is part 1 of chapter 5, titled Blood Type. I made my way to English in a daze. I didn't even realize when I first walked in that class had already started. "Thank you for joining us, Miss Swan," Mr. Mason said in a disparaging tone. I flushed and hurried to my seat. It wasn't until class ended that I realized Mike wasn't sitting in his usual seat next to mine. I felt a twinge of guilt, but he and Eric both met me at the door as usual, so I figured I wasn't totally unforgiven. Mike seemed to become more himself as we walked, gaining enthusiasm as he talked about the weather report for this weekend. The rain was supposed to take a minor break, and so maybe his beach trip would be possible. I tried to sound eager, to make up for disappointing him yesterday. It was hard. Rain or no rain, it would still only be in the high 40s if we were lucky. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. It was difficult to believe that I hadn't just imagined what Edward had said, and the ways his eyes had looked. Maybe it was just a very convincing dream that I'd confused with reality. That seemed more probable than that I really appealed to him on any level. So I was impatient and frightened as Jessica and I entered the cafeteria. I wanted to see his face, to see if he'd gone back to the cold and different person I'd known for several weeks. Or, if by some miracle I'd really had heard what I thought I heard this morning. Jessica babbled on and on about her dance plans. Lauren and Angela had asked the other boys, and they were all going together, completely unaware of my inattention. Disappointment flooded through me as my eyes unerringly focused on his table. The other four were there, but he was absent. Had he gone home? I followed the still babbling Jessica through the line, crushed. I'd lost my appetite. I bought nothing but a bottle of lemonade. I just wanted to sit down and sulk. "Edward Cullen is staring at you again," Jessica said, finally breaking through my abstraction with his name. "I wonder why he's sitting alone today." My head snapped up. I followed her gaze to see Edward, smiling crookedly, staring at me from an empty table across the cafeteria where we usually sat. Like that. Once he'd caught my eye, he raised one hand and motioned with his index finger for me to join him. Ugh. As I stared in disbelief, he winked. It just gets worse.
I love Book Edward.
Hey, Book Edward's the best. "Does he mean you?" Jessica asked with insulting astonishment in her voice. "Maybe he needs help with his biology homework," I muttered for her benefit. I better go see what he wants." I could feel her staring after me as I walked away. When I reached his table, I stood behind the chair from across him, unsure. "Why don't you sit with me today?" he asked, smiling. I sat down automatically, watching him with caution. He was still smiling. It was hard to believe that someone so beautiful could be real. I was afraid that he might disappear in a sudden puff of smoke and I would wake up. Every single time she even looks at him, we have to like go over the whole jack off
so
Edward session.
Beautiful.
Like we get it. He seemed to be waiting for me to say something. "This is different," I finally managed. "Well?" He paused and then the rest of his words followed in a rush. I decided as long as I was going to hell, I might as well do it thoroughly. Edgy. I don't know. He says it in the movie too and it has just as little context. And then, like, when he says it in the movie, it's like cue rock music. Because he, like, puts on his sunglasses and he's like, "As long as I'm going to hell."
Okay, Edward.
I waited for him to say something that made sense. Same. The seconds ticked by. "You know, I don't have any idea what you mean," I eventually pointed out. "I know," he smiled again. And then he changed the subject. "I think your friends are angry with me for stealing you. They'll survive." I could feel their stares boring into my back. "I may not give you back, though," he said with a wicked glint in his eyes. I gulped. He laughed. "You look worried." "No," I said, but ridiculously my voice broke. "Surprised, actually. What brought all this on? This is a terrible line of dialogue. I hate this." "I told you. I got tired of trying to stay away from you, so I'm giving up." He was still smiling, but his ochre eyes were serious. "Given up?" I repeated in confusion. "Yes, given up trying to be good. I'm just gonna do what I want now and let the chips fall where they may."
That sounds a little
I hate all of this. His smile faded as he explained. A hard edge crept into his voice. You lost me again. The breathtaking, crooked smile reappeared. I always say too much when I'm talking to you. That's one of my problems.
Is Edward drunk?
Edward just showed up to school smashed. Don't worry, I don't understand any of it, I said wirily. I'm counting on that. So, in plain English, are we friends now? Friends? He mused, dubious. Or not, I muttered. He grinned. Well, we can try, I suppose. But I'm warning you now that I'm not a good friend for you. I gotta read in a fucking drunken slur.
Alright, Edward.
Behind his smile, the warning was real. You say that a lot, I noticed, trying to ignore the sudden trembling in my stomach and to keep my voice even. Yes, because you're not listening to me. I'm still waiting for it to believe it.
Listening.
If you're smart, you'll avoid me. I think you've made your opinion on the subject of my intellect clear too. My eyes narrowed. He smiled apologetically. So as long as I'm being not smart, we'll just try to be friends? I struggled to sum up the confusing exchange. That sounds about right. I looked down at my hands wrapped around the lemonade bottle, not sure what to do. What are you thinking about? He asked curiously. I looked up into his deep gold eyes, becoming befuddled, and, as usual, it made me blurt out the truth. I'm trying to figure out what you are. His jaw tightened, but he kept his smile in place with some effort. Are you having any luck with that? He asked in an offhand tone. Not too much, I admitted. He chuckled. Well, what are your theories?
I think you're either drunk or high, but I'm not sure which.
I blushed. I had been facilitating during the last month between Bruce Wayne and Peter Parker. There is no way I was going to own up to that. Won't you tell me? He asked, tilting his head to one side with a shockingly tempting smile. I shook my head. No, I'm too embarrassed. That's really frustrating, you know. He complained.
Okay.
I think Stephanie Meyer was drunk during this whole fucking exchange.
She might have been.
Like, this is ridiculous. No, I disagreed quickly, my eyes narrowing. I can't imagine why that would be frustrating at all. Just because someone refuses to tell you what they're thinking, even if all the while they're making cryptic little remarks specifically designed to keep you up at night, wondering what they could possibly mean, why would that be frustrating? He grimaced. Or better, I continued, the pent-up annoyance flowing freely now, say that person also did a wide range of bizarre things, from saving your life under impossible circumstances one day, to treating you like a pariah the next, and he never explained any of that, even after he promised. That also would be very, very frustrating. You've got a bit of a temper, don't you? I don't like double standards.
Down, woman.
Oh, I didn't know you were going to talk this much. I don't like double standards. We stared at each other, unsmiling. He glanced over my shoulder, and then unexpectedly he snickered. What? Your boyfriend seems to think that I'm being unpleasant to you. He's debating whether or not to come break up our fight. He snickered again. I don't know what you're talking about, I said frostily, but I'm sure you're wrong either way. I'm not. I told you, most people are easy to read. Except me, of course. Yes, except for you. His mood shifted suddenly. His eyes turned brooding. I do wonder why that is. I had to look away from the intensity of his stare.
My favorite thing is that it's all because he can't read her mind, but
Yeah.
it could just be that Bella doesn't ever have a thought.
Bella's just brr, brain go brr. She just reads her mind, and it's just like the dial-up tone to the internet. He's like, no, that can't be right. There must be something wrong here. I had to look away from the intensity of his stare. I concentrated on unscrewing the lid of my lemonade. I took a swig, staring at the table without seeing it. Aren't you hungry? He asked, distracted. No. I didn't feel like mentioning that my stomach was already full of butterflies. You? I looked at the empty table in front of him. No, I'm not hungry. I didn't understand his expression. It looked like he was enjoying some sort of private joke. 'Cause he's a vampire. Can you do me a favor? I asked after a second of hesitation. He was suddenly wary. That depends on what you want. It's not much, I assured him. He waited, guarded but curious. I just wondered, could you warn me the next time before you decide to ignore me for my own good, just so I'm prepared? I looked at the lemonade bottle as I spoke, tracing the circle of the opening with my pinky finger. That sounds fair. He was pressing his lips together to keep from laughing when I looked up. Thank you. Then, can I have a favor in return? 1. Tell me one theory. Whoops. No, not that one. You didn't qualify. You just promised one answer, he reminded me. And you've broken promises yourself, I reminded him back. Just one theory. I promise I won't laugh. Yes, you will. I was positive about that. He looked down and then glanced at me through his long black lashes, his ochre eyes scorching. Please. He breathed, leaning towards me. I blinked, my mind going blank. Holy cow, how did he do that?
Holy cow. Golly gee.
Golly gee willikers. I blinked again. What? I asked, dazed. Please, just tell me one little theory. His eyes still smoldered me. Bitten by a radioactive spider? Was he a hypnotist too? Or was I just a hopeless pushover? That's not very creative, he scoffed. I'm sorry, that's all I got, I said. You're not even close, he teased. No spiders? Nope. And no radioactivity? None. Dang, I said.
Dang.
Kryptonite doesn't bother me either, he chuckled. You're not supposed to laugh, remember? He struggled to compose his face. I'll figure it out eventually, I warned him. I wish you wouldn't try. He was serious again. Because, what if I'm not a superhero? What if I'm the bad guy? He smiled playfully, but his eyes were impenetrable. Oh, I said, as several things he hinted fell suddenly into place. I see. Do you? His voice was abruptly severe, as he was afraid that he accidentally said too much. You're dangerous. I guess this is miserable.
Yeah.
You're dangerous, I guessed, my pulse quickening as I intuitively realized the truth of my own words. He was dangerous. He'd been trying to tell me that all along.
Yeah.
He just looked at me, eyes full of some emotion I couldn't comprehend. But not bad, I whispered, shaking my head. No, I don't believe that you're bad. I'm glad that they took this entire fucking chapter and just threw it out for the movie.
Yeah.
They just didn't do it. They were like, wow, this sucks.
They're like, Edward can't show up to school drunk. That's irresponsible.
This is ridiculous. You're wrong. His voice was almost inaudible. He looked down, stealing my bottle lid and then spinning it on his own fingers. I stared at him, wondering why I didn't feel afraid. He meant what he was saying. That was obvious. He stole her bottle cap. But I just felt anxious, on edge, and more than anything else, fascinated. The same way I always felt when he was near. The silence lasted until I noticed that the cafeteria was almost empty. I jumped to my feet. We're going to be late. I'm not going to class today, he said, twirling the lid so fast that it was a blur. Why not? It's healthy to ditch class now and then. He smiled at me, but his eyes were still troubled. Well, I'm going, I told him. I was far too big a coward to risk getting caught. He turned his attention back to his makeshift top. I'll see you later, then.
Can you imagine trying to impress a girl by spitting a bottle cap?
Yeah, check this out. It's my Beyblade skills. I hesitated, torn. But then I heard the first bell and it sent me hurrying out the door, with a last glance confirming that he hadn't moved a centimeter. As I half ran to class, my head was spinning faster than the bottle cap. So many questions had been answered. Or so few questions had been answered, the opposite, in fact. To so many new questions. This is a bad sentence. At least the rain had stopped. I was lucky. Mr. Banner wasn't in the room yet when I arrived. I settled quickly into my seat, aware that both Mike and Angela were staring at me. Mike looked resentful, Angela looked surprised and slightly in awe. Mr. Banner came into the room, calling the class to order. He was juggling a few cardboard boxes in his arms and put them down on Mike's table, telling him to start passing them around the class. "Okay, guys, I want you all to take a piece from the box," he said as he produced a large rubber gloves from the pocket of his lab jacket and put them on. The sharp sound as the glove snapped into place around his wrist seemed ominous to me. "The first should be an indicator card," he went on, grabbing a white card with 4 squares marked on it and displaying it. "The second is a 4-pronged applicator." He held up something that looked like a nearly toothless hairpick. "And the third is a sterile microlancet." He held up a small piece of blue plastic and split it open. The barb was invisible from the distance, but my stomach flipped. "I'll be coming around with a dropper of water to prepare your cards, so please don't start until I get to you." He began at Mike's table again, carefully putting 1 drop water onto each finger, or into each 4 squares. "Then I want you to carefully prick your finger with the lancet. Things that would never happen in a school."
Never.
Also, that's why Edward had to skip. He grabbed Mike's hand and jabbed the spike into the tip of Mike's middle finger. This is how you get sued.
Yeah.
Oh no. Clammy moisture broke out across my forehead. "Put a small drop of blood on each of the prongs," he demonstrated, squeezing Mike's finger until the blood flowed.
Also, it's just not sanitary.
Yeah. I swallowed convulsively, my stomach heaving. "And then apply it to the card." He finished holding up the dripping red card for us to see. Why is it dripping? So much blood.
It's supposed to be like a little drop.
He just hacked off Mike's finger. I closed my eyes, trying to hear through the ringing in my ear. "The Red Cross is having a blood drive in Port Angeles next weekend, so I thought you should all know your blood type." He sounded proud of himself. "They'll just do that there, you psycho."
He just wanted to stab some kids.
"Those of you who aren't 18 yet, you'll need your parents' permission, but I have slips at my desk." He continued through the room with his water drops. I put my cheek against the cool black tabletop. That should be most of the class.
Yeah.
That's not 18.
Yeah.
You're... You shouldn't be 18. All around me, I could hear squeals, complaints, and giggles as my classmates skewered their own fingers. I breathed slowly in and out through my mouth.
You don't have to do it.
"Bella, are you doing all right?" Mr. Banner asked. His voice was close to my head, and it sounded alarmed. "I already know my blood type, Mr. Banner," I said in a weak voice. I was afraid to raise it any louder. "Are you feeling okay?" "Yeah," I muttered, internally kicking myself for not ditching when I had the chance.
Bella's me.
"Hey, can someone take Bella to the nurse, please?" he called. I didn't have to look up to know that it would be Mike who volunteered. "Can you walk?" Mr. Banner asked. "Oh, yeah," I whispered. "Just get me out of here. I thought I'll crawl." Mike seemed eager as he put his arm around my waist and pulled my arm over his shoulder. I leaned against him heavily on the way out of the classroom. Mike towed me slowly across campus. When we were around the edge of the cafeteria, out of sight of Building 4 in case Mr. Banner was watching, I stopped. "Just let me sit for a minute," I begged. He helped me sit on the edge of the walk. "And whatever you do, keep your hand in your pocket," I warned. I was still so dizzy. I slumped over my side, putting my cheek against the freezing damp cement of the sidewalk, closing my eyes. That seemed to help a little. "Wow, you're green, Bella," Mike said. "Bella?" a different voice called from the distance. "No, please let me be imagining that horrible familiar voice." "What's wrong? Is she hurt?" The voice was closer now, and he sounded upset. I wasn't imagining it. I squeezed my eyes shut, hoping to die, or at the very least not to throw up. Mike seemed stressed. "I think she fainted. Now I don't know what happened. She didn't even stick her finger." "Bella," Edward's voice was right beside me, relieved. "Can you hear me?" "No," I groaned. "Go away." He chuckled. "I was taking her to the nurse," Mike explained in a defensive tone, "but she wouldn't go any further." I'll take her," Edward said. I could hear the smile still in his voice. "You go back to class." "No," Mike protested. "I'm supposed to do it." Suddenly the sidewalk disappeared from beneath me. My eyes flew open in shock. Edward had scooped me up in his arms as easily as if I weighed 10 pounds instead of 110. "Bah!" "Put me down!" Please let me not vomit on him. He was walking before I finished talking. "Hey," Mike called, already 10 paces behind us. Edward ignored him. "You look awful," he told me. "Put me back on the sidewalk," I moaned. The rocking movement of his walk was not helping. He held me away from his body gingerly, supporting all my weight with just his arms. It didn't seem to bother him. "So, you faint at the sight of blood?" He chuckled. This seemed to entertain him. I didn't answer. I closed my eyes again and fought the nausea with all my strength, clamping my lips together. "And not even your own blood," he continued, enjoying himself. I don't know how he opened the door while carrying me, but it was suddenly warm, so I knew we were inside. "Oh my!" I heard a female voice gasp. "She fainted in biology," Edward explained. And that is a perfect stopping point for part 1 of Chapter 5. And we'll hopefully pick up part 2 maybe tomorrow or later tonight or something. Thanks.